Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we've got a unique video. This one I wasn't going to shoot a video on, but I decided, teachable moment again, let's learn some things. Before we get started, I want to thank the customer who sent me this cool t-shirt. I think they had this t-shirt made. It says Cheese City on it, and there's a little blocks of cheese over here carved into a little cityscape. And I've said that sometimes on a video where something has been so cheesy. I said it was Cheese City. And today is a good day to wear the Cheese City t-shirt because we dug into another speaker that definitely was Cheese City. So let's dive into this thing and let's talk about this speaker. And it's a big speaker. It's a big floor standing speaker from Paradigm. And I've got it up on the lift table again so you can see. It has nice looking feet on it and stuff. It's a pretty tall little floor standing model. It's a 2.5 way design with woofers that they claim are 8 inches. And if you measure from this frame to this frame, it technically is 8 inches, but the playing surface is more like that of a 6.5 inch woofer. And it's got a tweeter up top that's got this fancy mesh over it and whatnot and whatever. And so I was sent this thing to see what I could do with it. And, you know, people send us all kinds of speakers and all kinds of price ranges. And this model, which is the Prestige model, and I'm yet to find anything prestigious about it, $5,000 a pair is what these things retailed for. And I am completely puzzled as to how they even reached those price points with what they made. This is the Prestige, I think it's a 95F model. And this thing is very lightly constructed. The box buzzed like crazy. We did sine wave signals to it at different frequencies, and it lit up at certain wavelengths. I mean, crazy cabinet noise going on. And I noticed in the stereophile measurement that they took on this thing years ago when they first came out, that their accelerometer on the side of the panel showed a lot of ringing going on this cabinet. And if we stuck our accelerometer on there and did measurements on different panels, we would absolutely show a lot of resonance on this thing. So that's one of the first things we noticed. And then let's look at the crossover that was in these speakers. Keep in mind, these were $5,000 a pair. This crossover is definitely Cheese City. I mean, there are the cheapest, cheesiest parts you can find in a speaker. And this goes right back to some things that we were talking about in the last video where there was reviewers that recommended that if you didn't like a particular speaker, instead of upgrading it, save your money and buy the right speaker. Like to buy a higher quality speaker if you're looking for higher quality. Well, 95% of the time when you step up to higher end models that are from some of these companies, you don't step up in performance and quality. You're just stepping up to a higher price point. The same cheesy crap parts that are in some of the budget level stuff is often the same thing that you see at the higher level stuff. So you're not getting more money's worth by spending more money. Often it's better just to dig into those things and upgrade those and give them better parts and go in and correct things with a new crossover that fix a lot of that stuff. And so we look for speakers that, what I've said in the past, have good bones. That means the drivers are a good quality or the cabinet was built really well. There's something there to start with, and then once you're done, it's a great speaker, and there's room there to spend a little money on it and make upgrades and do things, and it's worth it. Sometimes, though, it's just not worth it, and I've done videos in the past where I've said this group of speakers here that we've had in this week or the last 2 weeks weren't worth doing an upgrade on, and it just doesn't make any sense. Maybe they don't have good bones. The drivers are not well behaved in this case. They don't have a smooth response. It's going to take a lot of parts to go in and try and correct the response. It just doesn't make any sense. There's nothing good there to hang your hat on and say, I can work with this. The cabinet was lightly made. Crossover parts are all just need to be dropped in the garbage. The drivers are not that good of quality. It's just there's nothing there to work with. So I don't just sell upgrades just to sell upgrades. I mean, we do this as a service to our customers. We want to help bring people up in their performance levels and in their music enjoyment. And if you can spend a little money on a speaker, it's a fun project. The results are great. It's rewarding. Fantastic. But sometimes it's just not. And in this case, you can see it right in the measurements. Let's take a look at them. I want to look at the on-axis frequency response, and as you can see, it's pretty rough. And there's a big humped up area right in a region where there would be a lot of brightness. Right in that 1 to 2K region, it's pretty hot. And funny thing is, I looked at the old measurements that Stereophile made on these whenever they reviewed them. And let's look at their measured frequency response. And as you can see, it looks almost identical to what we've got in frequency response. In fact, I went in and cropped theirs out so that the scaling is the same. Let's throw up my measured response and the measured response from Stereophile. And as you can see, those two measured responses look a lot alike. I mean, we're using a little higher level of smoothing, possibly, but smoothing doesn't change accuracy. What smoothing does is it lets you see the average a little bit better, and it knocks out some of those sharp peaks, because we can't go in and correct for little wiggled peaks. We can go in and correct for average amplitude ranges and things like that when we do crossover upgrades or when we're designing crossovers. But this thing measured rough. When they measured it, it measured rough when I measured it. Our measurements match theirs, and there's been times in the past where companies have sent product to us. We've done measurements and things on it and given them a thumbs up before it goes to Stereophile and gets measured by John Atkinson. So I've got measurements on speakers that we've measured, and it was sent to them, and then they measured the exact same speaker, and the response is almost identical. Our measurements matches almost exactly. Same goes for the spectral decay. If you look at the spectral decay that we took on this thing, you'll see that it's not clean. There's some stored energy there, right there at that humped area there at the first of around just past 1 kHz. There's a lot of ringing, and if you look at the Stereophile measurement, they show almost the exact same stored energy in the same area. Now, they measured it in a little wider scale. They're measuring it over up to like 40 kHz, and you'll see this tweeter actually has a huge peak above 20 kHz that is not shown in our measurement. So it's kind of cool sometimes that they'll measure it that far out and you'll see something like that. That could be a issue. It could be a source of brightness or fatigue that it didn't even show up in my measurement. But yeah, that's rough. And let's look at the crossover response, because they put a dual binding post on the back of this so you can see the tweeter and then you can see the woofers. And if you look at this response, look in about 1200 kHz region, you see a huge peak there in the woofer's response. And keep in mind, this is after they put a crossover on it to try and control that response and flatten it out. And still, there's a great big peak there. So when I see that, I think, wow, big peak, narrow area. That's going to take a lot of notch filter and a lot of correction to try and get that out of it, which means a lot of parts. And already the impedance is low, so we can't do notch filters in series, or in parallel with the drivers. It'll have to be in line or in series with the drivers. So it gets pretty complex. I say we have to do that because the impedance does drop to 3.7 ohms. Let's go ahead and throw the impedance curve up there, and you can see it drops pretty low. Looking at the rest of the measurements, horizontal off-axis doesn't look bad as you move off-axis horizontal. That's not getting any worse. It's dropping off pretty evenly, but obviously the on-axis response is pretty bad to start with. Vertical off-axis, as you go up, it starts dropping a little bit there in the crossover region, but it's also dropping as you go higher because all these woofers are covering some of the same range. It's a 2.5 way design, and you can see it dropping out down in the lower region as well. So looking at these measured responses, I'm thinking, this doesn't make any sense. We've got nothing here to work with. This thing needs bracing. It needs a lot of no-res. It needs high-order filters to go in and correct this stuff. It needs everything in here replaced. And that's going to add up $900, $1,200 worth of parts and everything needed to fix these things. Just doesn't make any sense. You could have taken that same money and just built one of our kits and gotten really good quality drivers and just blown right past this. So we don't just do this just to be doing it and doing it just to sell people on our service. Sometimes it's better to recommend a better course of action, and that's exactly what I did on this model. It's like, this doesn't make any sense. Sometimes, even in these higher price point speakers, that doesn't mean it's a higher quality. It just means they've bumped you up into a higher price point. And sometimes people come in to a store or something and they say, look, I'm looking to spend this amount of money. And what they do is the stores would sell you something in that price point, and that's what they would play for you. If you were in the market for a speaker in the $5,000 to $8,000 range, if they had something in the $2,000 range that sounded better, you're still never going to hear it. They're going to sell you something in that higher price point. I've seen it happen, and I've had stores tell me this years ago where they said, I can't carry your product because it blows our price structure. It blows away the speakers in the $4,000 to $8,000 price range, and you're at $1,000 to $2,000 price range. If you're willing to spend that much money, that's what they're going to sell you. And that's the reason they have sometimes speakers at those higher price points, because there's customers willing to spend money thinking they're getting better quality when, in fact, quite often, and in a case like this one, they're not. Now, that isn't to say that that's the same across the board. There are companies out there that offer higher quality products when you move into those higher price points, and that's great. But that's not always the case. Sometimes the better option is to spend a little more money, or spend a little bit of money and do an upgrade and go in and make improvements if it's got good bones, if there's something there to work with. The upgrades, again, lots of fun. It's a good way to get people into DIY that were never into DIY before. And then they come to us for some of our own products, which is even better. So that's it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's, again, a little different. It was not a success video, but I felt like I needed to get this one out there and let you guys understand the big picture a little bit better, and hopefully appreciate what we do when we do something, and when we do an upgrade on a speaker. So see you guys in the next video.